Good day, mates. This is Match95. Welcome back to another video. This time, we're going back to, like, the last video I made was, like, Sixers info. But this time, we're going to talk about, like, player advantage, Uber advantage, and what you should and should not push off of. And I'm here on Badlands. Words. Badlands. There you go, right, guy. And I'm joined by, once again, my mentor and buddy over here, Rcrogue.
Oh yes, sorry. Hello.
He's a
How
big
you do?
slow.
Sorry, I'm like typing to people like literally 100% of the time, so I'm sorry, but yeah. Hello there, you two. How do you do?
Brain!
Yes,
They're not
I'm
gonna
here.
answer.
I'm here to talk about competitive zone. Yes. Oh, are you handing? Is the floor mine?
And we also got to present our special guest here,
Oh, dude, what up?
our right guy.
What up? Alright. Yeah.
Here we are. Two gamers. We're on the team Six Guys, Burgers, and Spies. Look for us in playoffs. Nobody thinks so, but we will be them. Shout out to my name. Okay.
Alright, I'm giving both you guys the floor now.
So what are we talking about? We're talking about
We're getting the floor.
different
All right.
advantages.
Yeah, right. Tell us about some advantages.
Alright,
Mr.
well,
Rye.
the most common and probably the most, like, prolific advantage is Uber advantage. For those of you who do not know, the Uber charge is the only achievable with a medic. You have to build a Uber charge by healing players. Once you have 100%, you become invulnerable. You can no longer hurt yourself. You can no longer be hurt by other people. And it's a very, very useful tool in killing enemy gamers and pushing through places where there are enemy gamers. Generally in Sixes, both teams have a medic, so playing around the Uber charges is a really big part of Sixes. If you have more Uber charge than the enemy, it is called an Uber advantage. So let's say I have 65% Uber charge, and we know that their medic died pretty recently, and he probably only has around 15 to 20%. If I have 65 and he has 15, let's say, that is a 50% advantage. That is a pretty massive add. So that means when we have 100% full Uber, we can make players invincible. Their team will only have 50% Uber. They cannot make players invincible. And that is a massive advantage, and like I said, probably the biggest advantage in competitive. Because, you know, in case it isn't obvious already, you have invulnerability, they do not. You push in, you kill their gamers, and they can't do much about it. So, that's probably the biggest advantage thing in TF2.
Quickly,
There are
though,
some
I would
smaller
like to
ones,
go into specifics about counting Ubers, because I feel
Oh,
like,
yes.
you know, they may know what Ubers are, and they may know like the very basics of it, but
This is true.
let's go into another basic concept about Ubers, how to count them. And like Ryguy was saying, he dabbled with it a little bit, just like 30 seconds ago, when he mentioned, we know their enemy gamer died a little bit ago, and we have 65, that means we have ad. So yes, when basically, like an Uber charge, let's say, building at its fastest rate takes 40 seconds. So that means you are healing a player that is not buffed. You're healing a player at a certain level. So like soldiers, you heal them if they're below 250 generally, I think. Then you are building.
It's about 250.
If you are healing a buffed player, buffed to the max for example, then you are not building. You are healing, and not healing, but you are charging
Building
Uber at a
slower
slower rate than you would be if you were healing hurt players. Also, a fun fact, just unrelated, when you heal players that are hurt, like let's say 13 HP, the medic will regen faster when he heals them than he heals a fully buffed target.
I believe it's like, you go up to something like 7 or 8 per second, which is pretty massive, because
Yeah, it's like
if you think about that, it's like, that's like probably 5% of the medic's health per second, which is pretty massive. Like, especially if you're hurt yourself, and a lot of times that situation comes up when you're retreating from a fight that you've lost,
for sure.
because your medic's probably hurt, the players he is healing are probably hurt, so you're healing those hurt players, they're getting health, you're getting extra health. Yeah, it's pretty. So back to Uber counting though. Takes about 40 seconds to charge an Uber if you're building at the fastest. There are other little things you can do, but the base is 40 seconds. That's like the kind of internal clock that most medic mains will use to judge the position of an Uber, because it's erring on the cautious side. They're always building. They're always going to have Uber as soon as they can, and that way you don't ever miss or overestimate your advantage. Probably the most common example of having an Uber advantage is at mids. That's probably because a mid happens every single round without fail. Let's say you go to mid and their medic dies and your medic does not. You now have full Uber advantage, and you know that because your medic stayed alive and theirs did not. However, I'm sorry. So that's in that situation that your medic or their medic dies and yours does not, your medic's life becomes more valuable now because you have that advantage, and if you lose the medic, you lose that advantage.
Yeah, and another thing to note, once you kill their medic, you can see that he's dead by holding tab. Always hold tab, by the way. Just like check it non-stop, by the way. That's a must. We'll get into that later with player ad. But when you kill their medic, please note when their medic will spawn too, so that you know exactly when they start healing, so that you can have that mental clock counting where their Uber should generally be at. That's just a side note, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So you want to, you should always, everybody on the team should know who the enemy's medic is, so they can tell when the healer is alive. Like, you don't really need to know, okay, this guy's their roamer, this guy's their demo, that's not super important. But you should know who the medic is, what his name is, so you can check and be like, okay, Ryguy is dead right now. I know Ryguy is the medic, therefore I know that their medic's dead. Because your medic should be keeping track of these things, but it's very helpful when your whole team kind of keeps track of stuff. Because a lot of times during the fight, you might not be able to pay attention to stuff. Yeah, so I talked about the full Uber at mid. That's a pretty optimal scenario. But let's say you guys used that full Uber. You didn't get to take last, but you did kill their medic again with the Uber. And you are now building Uber again. So you use your Uber, you're at 0%. You start building, you get up to 33%. And you are at 33%, and you look at tab and you see that their medic spawns. Assuming that their team is not bad and they don't forget to send a player back for the medic, which is also another important thing, because your medic can be alive, but if he's not healing, he means nothing. Assuming their team is not bad and they sent a player back to be with the medic, you can kind of start now counting the Ubers. You're like, okay, I was at 30% with their medic spawn, so I have 30% more than their medic. If you guys are both building at the same rate, which should be maximum rate, if your team is doing things correct, you should have 100% Uber when they have about 70%, which means you have a 30% ad. And now that's a pretty big ad, and you can definitely do something with it. I think it gives a 30% ad would be what, about maybe 12-15 seconds before they actually have Uber.
30%? Oh shoot.
Something like that. 25 would be about 10. Yeah. So 30 would be a little bit more than 10 seconds if they're still building at maximum rate, which a lot of times doesn't happen when they're running. So
yeah.
But if you know that your team, you have that 30% ad, your medic should be telling everybody that. So everybody on the team knows, okay, we have Uber advantage, we're going to try and use this advantage to do something with it. If you have that much of an advantage, you don't usually want to, give it up. So in order to use that 30% ad, you need to push as soon as you have the Uber. Otherwise, you're just going to give them Uber, and then it's equal, and you lose your advantage. It's called losing ad. That's what everyone says. Oh, we lost our ad, so we can't push now.
Yeah.
And a good thing to do there is have your team ready to push before you actually have the Uber. You have 30% ad, you're at 80%. Okay, I got 20% until we're ready to go. You should be ready to go through the choke and ready to go use your Uber when you hit 100. You shouldn't get to 100 and then be like, alright, now let's buff everybody up, now let's start walking towards choke, because there goes your 12 seconds of ad, you know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
And that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that teams make when counting Uber and when trying to use their Uber ads, they don't account for the fact that getting to the position to use your Uber takes time, and so you need to be almost in that position when you are getting the Uber, which, you know, can be a bit risky, but it's what you have to do. Unless you have that, like, literally 100% ad and you just killed their med and you already have Uber, then you have to, you know, you have to go quick. You got to keep up the pace. And yeah, so I mean I think that's a pretty good explanation of Uber ads.
Yeah,
And
let's say so.
what to do with them. There are more little things, but they're pretty complicated, and really just focus on getting that basic, like, Uber ad, Uber counting, Uber pushes, getting that down.
Was pushing with advantages something
Exactly.
in this video that you wanted to mention? Was that like the main part of this video?
Yeah, that and some like player advantages
Okay,
and stuff.
Yeah.
So the main thing we need to cover, I guess, is pushing with Ubers. So, like Ryguy was saying, when you have that ad, you know, your team needs to be ready, know exactly what they're going to do with this Uber before they go to use it. Because while you're preparing to use this Uber, they're also still building. You know, you have to realize that you're going to lose that ad if you don't act soon enough. So, typically, in a very general situation, if you have Uber advantage, what I would do, I guess not so general, I'm going to get into a little specifics here. Like, let's say, it depends on where their team is holding, whether or not you have to use Uber. So if you have Uber advantage and they know it, what they're going to be doing is holding in a passive hold. And what that means is they're going to have most of their players fairly far away from the choke, fairly far away from you and your team. Because if they were to hold closely and they were to get used on by this Uber, then they would all die, you know, easily. So they're going to be putting most of their players back. But what they're also going to be doing is putting someone to, like, try and get your Uber out. So that can be done with, like, 3 people spamming 3 of the projectile classes, or a roamer hiding, for example, a roamer bombing you as you walk through the choke. These are things you got to watch out for. But generally, when you have an ad, or snipers as well, any off classes, such as Spy or Sniper, but yes, any ad, any Uber advantage, you have to keep that in mind. Like, you have to push generally. Now, whether or not you have to use is another story. Like, for example, let's say you have 100% Uber advantage. They're not going to be getting Uber for a little while. You're walking through choke, right? The idea is to not use, because you want to take this Uber to their last. You have the opportunity to. You want to try and not use this Uber because you can take it even further. You want to get as much out of this Uber as you possibly can. So what you're going to try and do is bully them out. Just play it really slowly. Be very careful with your medic. Watch for the hiders, watch for the bombers, watch for the off classes. And you're just going to be slowly pushing them out, soldiers taking space and everything, while your medic proceeds to this point safely. And now, by this point, you know the enemy team may have 50%, but you may have 100 still. You will have 100 still. So now you can take this into last, because you safely got your medic through to the point without getting forced. But, you know, let's say you got forced. Well, shoot, you got forced, but ideally you should be able to take this point with this Uber. You may get 1 or 2 kills with the Uber, so it may not be the most successful thing in the world, but if you killed their medic, it would be successful, but you probably didn't kill their medic if they played it correctly. They would have their medic out, and now they would have the advantage, right? They would have like 50% or something, and you would have 0 in building. So now you can hold second, and you may have to do what they did, right? They have ads, so they want to push. Well, you don't want to put all of your players near where they are. You want to hold passive and try and get the Uber out safely. And what this is called leapfrogging. This is a very general, basic concept in TF2. What it really revolves around, it revolves around Ubers and how well a team plays it. You know, not losing too many players in each push, and using Ubers as effectively as possible to get to the other point, to the last point. So yeah, like, generally, when you have Uber advantage, push. When you don't have Uber advantage, when you're at a disadvantage or a disad, you hold farther back and try and get their Uber out with spam or a bombing soldier or an off class, whatever it may be. When Ubers are even, this can be a tricky one. Typically, Ubers are even, that's called a stalemate. You know, nobody's going to be pushing. Typically, what teams will do to break a stalemate is send a bombing soldier, or a sack as we call it, just a body. They just throw a body into the medic. Like typically it's a soldier. A bombing soldier will bomb through into their team, hit them with some rockets, hoping to get their Uber out or kill the medic. If it's successful, then your team has 100% Uber advantage. That's where you want to be. If that doesn't work, then since you're a player down, we're getting into player advantages now. Since you're a player down, they're going to do the same thing to try and get your Uber out now. And we'll get into players just a second. But that is typically how, even Ubers work out. And there's this other thing called solo Ubers. With those, generally, just you popped a player through. You use before they do. You use through the choke, wherever you may be, and you go straight for the medic. Whether it be a scout or a pocket, whatever, and you try and get their Uber out. Once you get their Uber out, you need to quickly leave. But while you're there trying to leave, try and shoot as many un-Ubered, unflashed enemy gamers as you can. Try and do as much damage as you possibly can. If you're not going to do any damage, if all the gamers are gone and all you're doing is like fighting an Ubered player, then you run away and, secure your life. And then once that is all over, once you just got the Ubers out, it will be a even Ubers, even players situation, and then you just have to play it again. It's still a stalemate. That's how stalemates go in this game. So yeah, anything to add to that? I don't know.
No, I think that's a pretty good explanation of it. Just the basic summary of that whole thing though is, if you have more Uber than the enemy, you have an advantage. If you don't, you have a disadvantage. If you are even, it's a stalemate, and you do things to try and tip that in your favor. Whether that's forcing their Uber out, or killing their medic before he can get Uber, or, whatever. Using your Uber more efficiently than the enemy team. Generally, the team that has better Ubers is going to win, because it's really hard to win a game with terrible Ubers, and it's pretty hard to. Well, I'm not gonna say that. I was gonna say it's pretty hard to lose a game with good Ubers, but if the enemy team also has good Ubers, you can definitely lose a game. So, I think it's basically the team with the better Ubers generally does better, though. So
yeah, and I kind of touched into leapfrogging there, which will also touch into the player advantages, and I'll let Ryguy take hold of that one since I just talked for a long time.
Yeah.
But player advantages, here we go.
Player advantages are...
And how to push off of them.
Yeah, player advantages are basically, I would say, the second biggest advantage in TF2. There are like two definite hard advantages, and that is Uber and players. Players, you have 6 players on each team. At its very essence, if you have more players than the enemy team does alive, you have a player advantage, and you can use your bodies and the amount of people you have to just brute force your way into stuff, because you have more people, you have more, manpower, whatever. So, again, let's just talk about mid fights. Let's say you won the mid fight, and you have 4 players alive, and they only have 2 players alive at their second or whatever. You have a player advantage. Let's say both your medics died, but you have 2 players, or you have 4 players, they have 2 players. You have a power or a person advantage, a player advantage. You can use that player advantage to take some space at second, and they're not going to be able to stop it. That's a pretty I guess basic example at mid. I wouldn't say that happens too often, to be honest, because I think most of the time if you want a mid, it's pretty decisive. There's sometimes those scrappy mids that go out forever, but another example, like what Rogue was talking about with leapfrogging Uber. Let's say you both have 100% Uber, and generally the team that, there's a bunch of different reasons for it, but I would say generally the team that has less to risk, or less risk in doing so. So let's say we have this second capped and we're pushing into their last, we might try and sack a player onto them in order to get their Uber out. Because if we get the Uber, great. We're probably going to lose a player either way. It's a sack, it's a sacrifice. That's what it stands for. You're basically sending in a player to die to hopefully get the Uber out. And if you get it out, great. You pop their Uber. Once your player respawns, you have even players, but you have more Uber. So congratulations. you won that battle. Now, rip road.
I come back from the dead.
Now let's say you don't. Let's say you sack a player and you don't. They now have a slight advantage on you in the player ad. They have 6 players alive. You only have 5 players alive. So now they can choose to do a couple things with that player ad. If they think, if it was an important player, let's say for some reason your demo died, and you don't have a demo now, they can choose to push on that. They can be like, okay, we have 6 players up, they don't have a demo man, we're gonna push on that because we have a player advantage. Or they can just choose to counter-sack, which is just, okay, we have this slight advantage, let's try and use it in a less risky way to equalize our situation, or to gain a bigger advantage in that they want to gain uber advantage. So you just sacked a player for their med, you didn't get them. Both teams have 100%, but the team at last has 6 players and you have 5 players. They can be like, okay, you just bombed a soldier into us and he failed. We're going to bomb a soldier into you. And let's say their soldier succeeds. He forces your medic. They now have, sure, they lost a player and you're going to get your spawn, and so you might have a slight player ad or whatever, but they now have a big uber ad. And so that's a pretty common example of where player ads come into play. That's kind of tied into uber ad. A situation where it's not really tied into the uber ads. Let's say you're just in a stalemate. We're at mid, they're at second. Classic Badlands stalemate or whatever. You're just taking pot shots at each other through choke. Let's say the team on mid, their player overextends into house and he gets killed by the team at second's flank. You now have a player advantage. You're now up 6-5. Still even ubers, etc. But that's, again, you can kind of you can either use that small advantage to try and create a bigger advantage, or you can push off. Now let's say you bleed 2 players. Let's say 2 players die on the flank and you're like, oh no, now we're down 2 players. They have a big player. Even if you have that uber, you're not going to be able to take a fight with them when they have literally, I guess, what is it? They have 100% of their team and you have 66% of your team. There's just no way you're going to be able to take that fight unless you get extremely lucky, which doesn't usually happen. That's a situation where player ad is pretty significant. And player ad is one of those weird things where, Uber's kind of definitive. Either you have Uber or you don't have Uber. Yes, you can have different, I guess, intensities of Uber ad. Let's say, a 15% Uber ad is much less intimidating than a 60% Uber ad or whatever. But with players, a two player advantage is enormously better than a 1 player advantage, because it's almost like exponential, I guess. The more players you don't have, the harder things become to hold, because you can't look at all the exits, and it's it doesn't matter what kind of other advantages you have, whether or not you have Uber or whether or not you still have your demo man with traps up. It doesn't matter, because you just physically cannot take that fight. So I think that's a pretty good explanation of what player ads are. I kind of touched on how to push with them, but I guess we can go into a little more depth. Do you have anything you want to say, Rogue?
Honestly, I think that was pretty good. If we talked about ways to push off of them, I think that would be maybe pretty specific.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess.
But then again, I got pretty specific last time with leapfrogging, so I don't know.
Yeah, and again, player ad is one of those things where, like I said, you can kind of make a choice of what to do with your player ad.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, especially if it's only a 1 player ad, you're gonna choose the safer option of just counter sacking and sending a player in to try and make a bigger advantage for you, which is the Uber ad. But let's say you want your team's, you're down by a round and you only have 2 minutes left. And you're like, okay, we have a player ad, but we gotta push. We can't sit here and just play, leapfrog Ubers all day. So we killed their flank, or we killed their roaming soldier. So now they're down a roamer. They only have 1 scout watching the flank, or they took something away from choke. You have to kind of realize where that advantage is going to be, and it depends on how well coordinated your team is and everything. Let's say you kill their flank player, you can now maybe send some extra players to the flank and push their flank really hard, or you can maybe use that opportunity to get a player behind and cause a distraction and create an opening for your combo to push forward through the choke. So you killed the roaming soldier in house here, right? You're at mid, they're at second. You killed their soldier, they're at second. They're now 5 players at second. You have 6 players at mid. All they have is a scout watching over here. Now let's say this scout, you see him run to resup or whatever, and you're like, okay, no, they don't have a roamer, they don't have a scout. Your soldier comes in here and starts spamming their combo from right here, and their combo is like, oh shoot, there's a soldier on us, and they all kind of look up here. And right when you do that, this is where the communication and, you know, knowing how to push and stuff kind of comes in. You're like, oh, they're all looking at our soldier. Your pocket gets forward here and starts spamming. And now all of a sudden they're in this position where, oh shit, we're taking a lot of damage. We don't have control of this area anymore. And, you know, they may even have to pop Uber or something, which is really good for you. If they have a terrible Uber, you can now just milk your Uber, which means you try to avoid using it as long as possible so that you have a bigger advantage when you finally do use it. Because if 2 teams pop Uber at the exact same time, it's kind of funny looking actually a lot of times when 2 teams pop Uber at the same time and everyone kind of just backs off and there's just 2 invincible soldiers kind of staring at each other and they're like, I don't know what to do here. You want to try and avoid that when you can. So let's say you use that player ad, you start pushing in, and you get a push. You get a push going, and you know you force out their Uber or whatever. Now you can that translates into you having a better Uber, and it all kind of comes back to the Ubers in the end, to be honest. But I guess we could talk about a situation where neither team has Uber.
Yeah, where neither team has Uber.
The player
then you
ads are
kind of
much
rely
more
on players
useful, yeah.
for sure, and that just depends on players. And really, you would play it just the same as if Ubers were kind of even. I
think the only thing that's different is you probably wouldn't counter sack.
Yeah.
I mean,
oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Because sacks are a lot more risky when the enemy team doesn't have Uber to force. Because
for sure,
if you're just jumping a medic that has 30%, like you're pretty much just feeding a player. Like you have a chance of getting the medic, but
you have to kill him.
You're much more likely. Yeah, you're much more likely to. I mean, unless the medic is very, very good about his damage surfing and all that stuff, like you're much more likely to get a force because the medic is afraid of dying than you are to actually kill the medic. So.
Feel good.
You know, a situation where, let's say both your medics just spawned, neither of you are going to have Uber for like 40 seconds, but you get a pick on the flank, and you're like, okay, let's go. Like, or another example, let's say your demo like killed one of their combo members with a trap. It's not always just flank members that die. It does happen more often because they get less heals and they're kind of more easy to catch out, but let's say your demo kills somebody with a trap, or just kill somebody with spam, or hits a really nice pipe. And now you have the advantage. They don't have Uber, you don't have Uber, but you have players, and you can now just use the amount of players you have to push into them, and they just have less. Like if you think about it, like each player has like a value of their health. So like your soldiers are 300 health, your demo's 260 health. They just have less health overall because they don't have as many players. So you're pushing into, you know, if you think about it in that regard, I guess, like, you have more health than them and you can outlast in a fight because you have more players, more people doing damage, more people shooting at things, more people focus firing, and there's more people for them to try and shoot and kill, which generally leads to you being able to win pushes. So, I mean, that's a pretty good example of pushing with, you know, without Uber, but having a player ad.
Yeah, this is when health advantages come into play.
Every situation is going to be different, so it's hard to give very specific examples, and very specific examples aren't going to be super helpful in a lot of situations, because it really, you know, then the smaller advantages like health or positioning come into play.
Yes, positioning also is just an insanely huge one. It's an underrated one, and I feel like that's a video for another day, honestly, because it's so key. But
I would say positioning, like, especially in a situation where you don't have Ubers, is almost more important than health.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
like, you know, a 300 pocket is the same health no matter where he is, but a 300 pocket standing on high ground spamming the choke versus a 300 pocket sitting in the choke eating like tons of pills and stuff like that is a huge difference.
Oh yeah.
Like, I'd rather have a pocket that doesn't have a buff that's sitting in a good position than a pocket that has a buff that's sitting in a really bad position. Especially like, you know, in a situation where you have a player disadvantage, because position means even more than, because it's all about the efficiency of your players that you have alive. So, you know, you could have a player advantage, but if the other team is positioned better and you push into them, no Ubers, whatever, like we're just taking the Ubers out of the equation, you push into them and you're like, oh, they're a player down, let's push into them. But then their pocket is standing in position, he gets 2 kills when you guys walk in. Like, you just lost your entire player advantage and even gave them player advantage, all because their pocket played in a good position. Or their demo had a good trap up and played in a good position where you couldn't kill him or kill his trap without putting yourself in danger. Like, those are the smaller advantages that I don't know. I kind of touched on it earlier. There's 2 like solid hard advantages, and that is players and Uber, because you can count them. You can, you know, you can quantify them. With health and positioning, like, sure, I guess you can technically quantify health, but you're never gonna know the exact health of the enemy team, and it's more one of those advantages that you have to like kind of guess at. You're like, oh, they were eating a bunch of rockets, they're weak-ish. Like, you know, you can't be exactly like their demos at 115, their soldiers at 130, their scouts at 185. Like, you don't know that information, but you know a general, like, we're healthier than them, we can push off this, and we don't need heals as much in the moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the same thing with positioning. You can't really quantify it. Like, there's no number value for a pocket sitting here as opposed to a pocket sitting on Pride here, you know. But one position may be more advantageous. It might be different in a different situation, you know. Like, let's say they're pushing, you know, a push through choke versus a push through the balcony area here. Like, your pocket being near choke might be nice for this. But if they push through stairs, it might be nicer to have your pocket back here. There's no like definitive answer for it. It really just depends on the situation. But those small advantages can make all the difference. And oftentimes in TF2, that's what a lot of your pushes come down to. Because if you're both good teams, you're not going to let the big obvious advantages like cripple your team. Because you're going to do things to equalize those big obvious advantages. And then you're going to have to use those smaller advantages to actually push.
Yeah, for sure. Taking advantage of the smaller advantages is what makes a good team better than a... Yeah, exactly.
Because any team can be like, oh, we have Uber and they don't, let's push. But, you know, I guarantee if we, you know, our team tried to push into Froyo Tech with 100% advantage, we would probably fail that push. Just because they're gonna have those little advantages, like, you know, and they're going to be smart enough to know, okay, this is the situation, this is what we have to do to not lose this. And they use those smaller advantages to make up for their big disadvantages.
Shoot, we're not that bad, but yeah.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
I don't know, man. Full ad, though. I don't know.
Full ad, yeah, but like, you know how Thor goes.
True. Let's do that.
Roasted. No, I'm just kidding.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't want to make... It's up to you, Zone. Honestly, it's your video, but if we go into details about more
I think
about
it's
health and when to
much,
use it, it's just too much at this
It's
point.
also more complicated, like, than just a
Yeah,
basic
it's
advantage.
true.
Just know that, you know, there are smaller advantages such as health and positioning, but the major advantages are Uber advantages and player advantages, and the health and positioning kind of play into those. And I feel like we did a pretty good summary of those 2 major advantages.
I would say so.
Oh yeah. That other stuff definitely can be in another video. It's like,
Yeah, sure.
There's
Might
also
take
like
some examples.
weird
but-
advantages like just like, you know, off classes and stuff. Like
Yeah, indeed. Like if they
Like,
have a
I would
sniper,
yeah,
then
I
you
would
play
say-
a different way. Then
yeah,
yeah.
like I would say having a sniper can almost be like, you know, if you have a good sniper, he's worth a little bit more than a scout when you're trying to hold a point. Because scouts can only do so much. Like, yeah, they can deny bombing soldiers, but like they don't have spam, they don't really have area denial in terms of like they can't just like shoot a rocket and hit damage in a broad area to like deny that area from someone. But like a sniper, you know, you can shut down an entire choke or an entire side of the map with a sniper if he's good, because you know, you run the risk of being insta-killed if you walk into his sight line. Whereas a scout can't do any of that. And for a scout to be effective, he needs to be close, which is not necessarily what you want to be doing when you're holding. So, you know, or like at last, having an engineer versus having a scout, or having a heavy versus having a scout, or versus having a roaming soldier. Those are all other examples of little advantages that you can use to like make up for disads. Like having a pyro. A pyro is a great way to, like, let's say they have like 20% Uber at, and you know they're gonna push on it, but you have a pyro, and you kind of like sacrifice your pyro for the greater good. You have him walk up there and he just air blasts their Uber and wastes all their Uber. Or half their Uber, even half their Uber is great, you know? You walk up there, spray some flames, air blast people. Everybody's like, what the hell's going on? This is a broken mechanic, what the fuck? They get thrown into the skybox. And then their Uber's over, and then they're like, well shit, we had 25% advantage, but that pyro completely ruined our day. Like, yeah, we killed the pyro, but now they have Uber, and we're in last and don't have Uber anymore, and now you done fucked up. Like, I don't know, that's another example of an advantage that's not exactly, I mean, it has a little bit of positioning, but it's not exactly like a health or positioning advantage. It's not a player advantage, it's not an Uber advantage, it's just an advantage that one of the classes gives you that the other ones don't in a specific situation. Which is why you have the generalist classes, which are generally better than the other classes. Then you have classes like pick classes and defense classes that are better than the generalist classes in certain like niche situations where they can do things that like a scout can't, for example.
Indeed.
So
I think
yeah.
we may have saturated a little bit, but you know what? I think it's good. This is all good information. I wouldn't call it saturation.
I was gonna say, like, I think that's a good, a small example of a lesser talked about advantage that can be really powerful.
For sure.
Oh yeah.
Or like Rcrogue here on the Poot, man. Like, you know, having that at last is like having a second sentry gun with 450 HP.
Alright. Since you're talking about like the classes, the specialists, just have my one question.
Oh yeah.
Because now I play like a spy and a Highlander. In Highlander, you think he's more like a pick option?
In Highlander, I think in Highlander, especially at upper levels, Spy is more of like a threat, and he's a like. I mean, yeah, you can be good at Spy and get picks and stuff, but like against upper level teams, they're gonna be good at spy checking, and it's more like, you know, the thought of there's always a spy behind us, and like when there is a spy up, you have to be careful.
Alright.
And then it's also good for intel, like, which can be good in sixes as well, but like you have a player who's completely invisible that can sit there and be like, this is where this is, this is where this is, the sniper's peeking here, that you can't normally see without peeking the sniper, you know what I mean? But you have an invisible spy looking at him. So I think, like, honestly, that's what I've seen for higher level Highlander. That's more what spies do. Also with like the ambassador recently, like people getting really good with the ambassador. Spies play really gun heavy because if you can hit 102 damage headshots reliably, like, you know, you can two shot a scout. If you hit a headshot on him, you can just body shot him right after. It's pretty powerful. Or you can just harass people, or, you know, maybe they call, oh, medic took 80, and then you're like, okay, I headshot the med and he drops from back here, and they had no idea because I was invisible. But it's less of just like a pick. I mean, it's still a pick class. It's just the nature of the class. It's always going to be a pick class. It's never going to be like a combat class. It's more so a pick class in sixes because this was something that I kind of like thought about while thinking, or like talking, I guess, about the like RGL Prolander stuff going on, the 7v7. Sigafu was actually talking about how Spy has been very interesting and effective in that league because you don't always have to have a spy. And that's the problem with Highlander, is that the other team always knows that there's a spy, so they're always aware that they're always hyper aware of Spy. Whereas in like 6s and 7s, there's not always a spy, and so having a spy is more of a surprise play. And therefore you're able to get some of those, like, you know, just walk up and backstab the med picks a lot easier because people aren't looking for it. And then, yeah, so that's what you asked about with Spy, right?
Yeah. Let's see, it was... I think that's it. This video's been going on quite long enough.
Yeah.
So I guess next time we talk about some other 60s information in the next video.
Sure, just hit me up, hit us up if you want some more competitive-minded videos.
Alright. I think I have an idea for another one. Watch for another video.
Coolio.
Well then, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Unmatched95, and these two lovely gentlemen at Rcrogue and Ryguy. Do you have anything to say to the audience before I end it?
No,
I
not
mean,
really.
I can think of something, but no, I'm good.
Okay.
Bro, give him a fat doggo meme to end it off.
Alright, so... I don't have one on... I mean, it's the pictures, dude. You're giving me a heckin' concern right now, you know that? There you go, there's the doggo meme.
It's just a doggo, man.
That heckin' concern is doggo speak.
Yes.
Alright. So I'm just gonna leave it here. So thank everyone for watching. My name is Unmatched95, and once again, these two lovely gentlemen, Rcrogue and Ryguy, thank you very much for helping me out with this video. And make sure to have their video, their YouTube, and their team in the description below. Make sure to check them out, give them a nice holler and all that stuff, and show some love and all that
Please don't
is.
shitpost on our page.
And please don't shitpost. I'm watching. Just know that if you shitpost, I'm just gonna go to Tumblr and start like bitching or something like that. I don't know. Other than that, I'll see you guys in the next video. GG later, mate. And yeah, I said it before in another video. I'm about to say it now. Masood, would you please roll the outro?